Hey, hi, good morning. This is Neil here, and I'm very delighted to talk to you live today regarding how we convert voice of customer into business needs. I want to spend the next few minutes talking about various techniques and tools which are there in Six Sigma, which can be used for essentially converting the voice of customers. In fact, we will go one step further and talk about how do we gather voice of customer, how do we determine who our customers are. Then we would go to the next step of converting that verbatim into customer needs, essentially business needs, and then to technical needs. I'm going to use an approach of a case study for this. I have a live case study. I want to introduce the case study and walk you through the case study, and I'm sure in this process you're going to learn. So first things first, I'm going to briefly talk about our organization, and then I'm going to move on into the actual case study. And I assure you that it's not going to take anything more than 30 seconds. So let's move on, talk about who we are. As an organization, as I mentioned, we offer Lean Six Sigma education and certification, and this is part of an organization called Canopus Business Management Group. We have around 25,000 students, and we cover various corporates and universities where we have tie-up for the course. So we do offer certification. So if you visit the link that I've mentioned at the bottom, which is Six Sigma certificationcourse.com/CERT, you would be able to understand more about the certification criteria, how could you go about getting your certification, etc. So with that brief note about who we are, I'm going to talk about the actual case study right now. The case study that I want to introduce to you is a scenario of a large organization, a conglomerate, which has businesses across various sectors, and they recently entered the real estate sector. So they wanted to sell retail housing units to customers, and they ventured into this new business unit. They launched a few projects, and they were pretty successful in achieving reasonably good business results. The challenge for the organization, however, is that they were not able to leverage some of the contacts, some of the network that they already have. They have a lot of goodwill in the market, and they could not tap that goodwill. They were mainly relying upon the digital marketing leads, and the cost of each converted sale, the marketing cost of each converted sale worked out to be somewhere around $1,300 or so. So most of the referrals that they were getting were pretty much passive referrals, soft referrals, but they didn't have a good program around how they can generate referral leads from their clients. So that was their concern. From the historic data that they have, they realized that the conversion ratio of referral leads are as good as 80%, and the cost would be negligible. You would know that. So there is a huge opportunity. So that's the business case and the problem statement. So the goal was actually to establish a process for actively generating referral leads and using that as a source for lead generation and for sales. And at the end of this initiative, they wanted to at least get around 25% of their sale from referral leads. So that was their objective. So what process or what approach do we use in this scenario? So this is a classical scenario of designing a process, right? And how would you use a classical Six Sigma approach? We need to first start with our customers, right? We can't just go ahead and design a process that we think is right. We need to look at the customers, understand the customer needs, and then go ahead and create our process, right? So the first step is to identify who our stakeholders are, who our target stakeholders are. I'm not using the word customer here intentionally because I want to restrict this conversation not just to customers, but I want to also include other stakeholders as well. because in businesses we realize that customers play a significant role, but for us to be successful we need to not just look at customers alone, but we need to look at various other stakeholders as well. And so that's why I'm calling that the stakeholder rather than calling that the customer. Now the next step for us would be to go and gain insights from them and then affinitize those needs using affinity diagram to understand what are the underlying issues, and then finally map those issues to business needs. So these broadly would be the 4 different steps, and we will talk about how we will go about using some of the tools in the next few minutes. I'm sure as a Six Sigma black belt or as a green belt, you must have learned how to convert voice of customer into business needs. And if you haven't been exposed, this is part of any Lean Six Sigma green belt curriculum. So if you're looking for certification, etc., the concepts that we're talking today would be very, very important for you from an exam perspective and of course from an implementation perspective. So we offer a variety of Lean and Six Sigma related resources, learning resources. So I just want to quickly brief on them. We do have free resources which are free courses. We have a variety of online courses starting from green belt, black belt. We have courses on Python using Six Sigma or using Python to do Six Sigma analysis, both ways. Yeah, we have a book on how do you prepare. So the book is in a question answer format that's called as the Lean Six Sigma Master Book for Green Belt certification. So that's also there. We also have question papers, what we call as practice tests for IASSE, ASQ for Green Belt and Black Belt. So we have a variety of resources. If you want to learn similar concepts, you should look at them. Okay, coming back to the case study, which is more important for us right now. In this scenario, we went about looking at who are our internal and external stakeholders. The focus first was on our external stakeholders. And as you would know, our external stakeholders would be our customers. Essentially, this is a referral program. So we're looking at who could be our potential referral customers. So they could be group employees who are working in the group, in the conglomerate, partner ecosystem. We're looking also at the employees as or the people that we know, the referrals, as not just customers. Another way of looking at them as depending on the how much influence they cause or they impact on the sale, you could call them as buyers, users. So buyers are people who make the transaction happen. Users are essentially the people who live in the house, for example. The decision makers are those who cut the check, and influencers are those who influence the decision of buying the house. So your kid could be an influencer, you could be cutting the check, users could be yourself and your family members, and in this case buyer would be you if you're doing it directly, or if you're going through a broker, then the broker would also be a buyer for you. So we could also look at this problem from an economical standpoint, that is to say as HNIs, upper middle class or affordable class, and so on. You could also split the same customer segment by geography. So you could call them as a tier 1 or tier 2 city dwellers. So you could look at this data in multiple ways if you want to mix and match and make sure that you hit the right target segment. So that's for external. So we did this exercise of finding out how many of our customers fall into each of those buckets. I've not put the numbers here, but that's what we did. The next was to look at internal stakeholders. We have frontline employees who are actually involved, interacting with the customers, and then there are back-end employees who often don't necessarily interact with the customers but have a wide variety of experience handling the customer transactions. So they are also important stakeholders to us. So once we have done this, the next step for us was to go ahead and select who our priority segments are. What you're seeing on the screen now are essentially a more structured way of segmenting the customers. So you could segment the customers by revenue, you could segment them by geography, by their size, or by industry, by market segment, by loyalty. So there could be various ways in which you could segment the customers. I had shown you the way I did that, and you could do it in other ways as well. So once we did this exercise, the next priority for us was essentially to go and prioritize these stakeholders because it's not humanly possible for us to touch or meet or connect with all these customer segments. So we did a priority ranking as a team where we felt there was more traction, where we felt there's potential, and where we felt there is enough data available for us to go and reach out. So the ones here are the ones where we thought the highest priority should be, 2s would be the next, and 3s would be the last. So moving further, we would now go and interview those customers, or we would try to gain insights from the customers by using other means, not necessarily interviews. But remember that these customer interviews are not like other interviews that you would do with your customer, where you would throw open a set of questions asking how would you rate our service, how would you rate our product, and so on. This is going to be a insight based interview, which means you need to ask a lot of open-ended questions. You need to have fewer questions, don't have too many questions. Again, I wouldn't emphasize much on the sample size. In this case, I know there are statistical sample size computations, and we cover that in our green belt course as well. But here the emphasis is going to be on qualitative data. So we are going to focus more on the insights. So remember that the feedback you get should be directly helpful for the objective of this project. You should also be able to articulate or extract articulate or unarticulated needs of the customers. Unarticulated needs essentially needs to come out. So you may want to go beyond looking at just the literal verbal feedback and look at even non-verbal clues, because we know non-verbal clues actually amount to around 80% of what people try to communicate. So if you're doing a face-to-face discussion, yeah, you should go ahead and try doing that as also a source of data, and make sure that you try to use this information to challenge your own beliefs about what products you offer and how your customers are using these products. So once this exercise is done, that is the voice of customer is done, we would have ample data. But before we go ahead and do that, we need to do a little bit of planning. So based on what I talked about, you need to take your important customer segments, the priority customer segments, and map them to see for which segment, what kind of method am I going to use to capture the feedback. Essentially, interviews, which I talked about, could be one big way of capturing insights. But yes, you could also look at focus group discussions. You could look at surveys as well. So the grid that you see on your right side is the grid which points towards which segment and what method of data collection would be used. And the numbers you see within each of those blocks essentially talk about how many samples of customers, so how many data points are we essentially looking at. So surveys, you could touch more people, but for the focus group discussions, we're talking about 3 groups. So each group could have around 7 to 8 customers. So we're talking about around 18 to 20 customers, and the interviews would be 1-to-1. So we're talking about 6 plus 3. So that's 9 customers or 9 stakeholders that we would interview. Also remember that the interview questions for the customers, in this case the group employees who are HNIs, that is high net worth individuals, and the sales team who are internal stakeholders, have to be very different. So you need to do some homework preparing those questions. When we did this exercise, here's what we got. We got a lot of insights. So we recorded most of the conversation that we did, and then we try to extract the verbatims, the phrases which are more important for us, more pertinent for us. And I'm showing you just a sample of those verbatim that you would see on your screen now. And this verbatim was essentially about what the customers felt about us. And so if you see, you would have a wide range of points. I'm going to take a brief pause for 30 seconds for you to read what's there on the screen, so you could make some meaning out of it yourself. So there you go. I'm sure you would by now realize that customers have a variety of reasons for why they are not referring. We are talking about potential referral customers, employees of the organization, of the conglomerate, or our ecosystem partners or our current customers, why are they not referring their friends, they're not referring their colleagues, they're not referring their relatives to come and buy our new project, a new real estate property? So these were a snapshot of those reasons. Next thing was to affinitize that. So an affinity diagram is a tool which is used for grouping broadly the customer needs. We could also group anything else that you want. We commonly use the affinity diagram in strategy workshops to group the various points that people come out with when we do a visioning exercise, etc. But in this case, our focus was to group the customer requirements. So we broadly put that into 4 broad buckets. So these buckets were communication, process, product, and service offering. The next was the incentives. And you see logically we have put each of those issues or each of those verbatims into these various buckets, these 4 buckets. You could have as many buckets you want, but I personally would recommend that don't go beyond 6 to 8 buckets. It becomes overwhelming for you. One key point that I want to highlight when you do this is that don't decide the title and then put the items below that. That's what we would be tempted to do, but try to do the reverse. So try to group these items logically depending on what they're talking about. So this could be things that you write on a post-it, on a sticky, and try to reorganize them, move them around on a piece of paper, a chart paper, or on a wall, and try to group them and do that as a group activity. And you would realize that many of you or most of you would agree that certain things would fall under a specific theme, and then you might also be convinced that this should be the topic for the theme. Like in this case, we decided it should be communication, process, product and service offering, and incentive. So that is the way for you to go and group these items. Remember that the process is more important. That is, the process of doing the affinity diagram is more important than the outcome itself. So once we have done that, then the next step was to go ahead and extract the issues. So for these 4 buckets, based on these verbatims, ideally you should underline the key phrases in each of those verbatims and then extract and say what is it that the customer is talking about, what are the pain points, or relating to the objective that we have on hand, the project, what is it that people are saying. So those were then grouped into the same buckets. There could be some overlaps, and that's why you see that the arrow marks for communication and product service offering do overlap a little bit. But broadly, the objective here is to make sure that we understand the underlying issues under various themes. So that's the primary objective. From here on, I'm going to take only a snapshot of few things and then go a little deeper and explain the process. So till now, we have completed capturing the voice of customer and we have identified the issues. The next step would be the final step where we are trying to convert the issues into functional requirements or business requirements. I'm sure if you're working in IT organizations or you're working in corporate or in functions which require you to generate or analyze and come up with problem statements, business cases, etc., you must have heard of this business requirement document, right? Or business needs analysis. So essentially, this is what we're trying to do. From the voice of the stakeholders, we're trying to extract and say what are the business needs here. We are articulating the business needs, and you see right on your screen that the business needs in this case are all horizontally placed, so in the dark blue. And I have taken just a snapshot of few customer needs. Essentially, you need to take all of them. The issues, I have taken only a few set of around 4 issues or so to simplify this and show you. And you see how I got those items that I've written on the top. Referral announcements should reach at least 60% of the customers. The first contact with the customer who has been referred, the prospect with whom you're going to be pursuing your sales, should happen in the first 4 hours, and so on. So you have all the other points which are mentioned here Essentially, what we're trying to say here is that these items will have to either come through brainstorming or through benchmarking, or that is competitive benchmarking. We'll briefly talk about that. Or it has to come from your vendors. The vendors will have to extract and tell you, depending on the business needs that you've given, as to how they will be able to fulfill those needs. So essentially, this is what a vendor, if you're engaging a single vendor, he would give that as a solution document or solution architecture if it involves some kind of technology. But remember that this is very, very important for you to own, and you cannot outsource this to a vendor. It's quite easy to outsource this to a vendor, but remember that if you want the required outcome of this initiative or this product that you're trying to buy, or solution that you're trying to put in place in your organization, you need to own this. So the source for this could be benchmarking, looking at what competitors are doing or competent competitors are doing. It could be going inward, analyzing the current process to find out what is flawed, and then unflaw it, or put a solution for that, or put a countermeasure for that, and that countermeasure would become a functional need or a business need. Or it could come from a technology breakthrough. You know, something is happening in ML, something is happening in AI, and you could take that and convert that into needs as well. So you could arrive at this in a variety of ways, and there is some science to that. So you could not jump to this step right away sometimes. So what you have to do is to go step by step. So from customer needs to business needs. Then from business needs, you go into functional needs. From functional needs, you go into what we call as subsystem needs. So you could drill that down in multiple ways, but I'm just showing you a simpler version of how this could essentially happen. So take a look at it. Essentially, the circle inside a circle, the blue circle inside a circle, means there is a strong relationship. And the dots that you see, the green dots, the colors are not important, but the sign is very commonly used. The circle represents a medium impact, where you have no symbol means there is low or no impact, and a circle inside a circle, as I mentioned earlier, is a strong impact. So if I vertically start analyzing this data, I might be able to say in which functional or business need do I have maximum circle inside a circle. So you have 3 of them having 2 circles inside a circle. It is single point of ownership for referral, dispersal within 48 hours, and multiple options on referral incentive. These 3 have circle inside a circle. So these business needs become extremely important for us to fulfill. You could also analyze this horizontally to see for which customer requirement do you have a circle inside a circle, for which you don't have a circle inside a circle. That means that for that customer need, you have not been able to derive a business need or a business functionality. That's a weak area for us in the business. So this analysis could be done in multiple ways. If you are overwhelmed and you have too many items in your list, let's say I had only a handful of items there on the top, but let's say you had 30 or 20 different business needs, and it's not possible for you to fulfill all those business needs. So the best way for you to do that would be to prioritize. So you could use what's called as a MOSCO tool. There are various ways in which you do it. People talk about Kano model. I've covered that in my course as well, Kano model. We also use the MOSCO. For a change, I want to